Hey, it's Scott. Welcome back to Spin Magazine's Lip Service. I think you're going to really enjoy this episode. On this episode, one of the greatest guitar players of all time, one of the most important rock bands of all time, Alice in Chains, coming back to the show for the second time, Mr. Jerry Cantrell. We get into everything from the history of Alice in Chains to his new album and tour and everything in between. Come up in just a moment, Mr. Jerry Cantrell of Alice in Chains. Welcome back to Spin Magazine's Lip Service. I'm with the one and only Jerry Cantrell. Thanks for coming back. We did this over Zoom like a couple years ago. It's always better to do in person.
Yeah, that was probably COVID, right?
I think so. When nobody saw anyone, actually. And you have an amazing new record, and the tour dates dropped today.
Yeah.
Just, I think, like an hour ago or something. I was on Instagram. I saw the whole tour announced for next year. It's exciting, right?
Yeah, it's cool. We actually got to do a pre-tour with Gavin and Candlebox and Tim Montana and Bones UK. It was fun.
We were talking because Gavin's a great friend for many years, and you guys have such a special bond. He's always saying the most amazing stuff about you. Like, when did you guys meet?
Oh, well, I don't know, probably in the mid-'90s or so, somewhere around then.
Because every now and then he comes on stage with you. You do Man in the Box together, which is great. I know that he just loves touring with you. I think at some point you shared a producer, right? There was like Tyler Bates maybe worked on both your records.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Tyler's worked with us both.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Gavin's just a sweetheart. He's an English gentleman, and he's a hell of a songwriter and front man, and he's just a cool dude.
He is. It's funny because the last show we had on Zakk Wylde, and I feel like every guest we have on you're connected to.
Yeah.
You toured with Ozzy, I think, what was it, 92 maybe?
91.
91.
Yeah.
Any great stories from that tour?
I mean,
so many, but I mean,
probably
any that you can
probably
talk
ones
about.
probably ones I can't talk about here.
There's probably a couple, right? There's always a couple that
I think the first date we showed up at some, I don't know, motor lodge somewhere. And, we pulled up in the bus and we were checking into our hotel. And as we were moving stuff from the bus to the rooms, it was the kind with like a double decker motor lodge or whatever with the doors on the outside where the cars park. So, we were checking into our room and we kept seeing this guy like, across the way in the bushes, and he didn't look like he had any clothes on or anything.
Could have been Ozzy.
And it was Zakk. And he's like, hey, what's going on? Hey, can you guys give me a towel, man? I locked myself out of my room. And so he's outside of his room naked, and he was hiding in a bush. So we got him a towel. And I think he just walked on over and, he didn't really mind being naked, but I think we got him a towel anyway. And then we grabbed a bunch of ice and beer from the bus and filled up his bathtub and spent the night just hanging out and drinking. That was the first time I met Zakk.
He's the best. I mean, I'm not sure. I can't remember like what phase Ozzy was in at that point. Was it like the Snorting Ants phase, or was it?
Well, the band was Mike Inez, Zakk Wylde, and Randy Castillo.
Yeah. Actually, I spoke to Zakk about that. And, obviously Mike ended up joining your band.
Yeah, we got a bass player out of that tour.
Right, that's true. And talk about some of the other road stories. I mean, there's some great stories. Obviously, you and Eddie, I know you had an incredible friendship with Eddie. There was like a story about his guitar that went missing for many years, and you ended up finding it.
Yeah.
19 years later.
That was 91 as well. So that was a big year for us. And, those were two bands that were, Ozzy and Sabbath and as a solo artist as well. And Van Halen, they were, we were big fans of those bands, and to have the opportunity to go out and support those guys while we were kind of starting to ignite, and
it's like a dream come true.
Things were taking off, and to you end up figuring out that you're kind of similar people, and we fell in with them pretty fast. So you make lifelong friends, and it was I think Sammy and Ed's idea to have us out. And so both Sammy and Ed, I just came back from Cabo a couple of days ago. I usually go down for the second week of October for Sammy's birthday.
Yeah.
So I just jammed with him at his club in Cabo a few days ago. And but yeah, Ed and I hit it off. I mean, he would either be in my dressing room, I would be in his, or we'd be in each other's hotel rooms, or get on a plane to go hang out and play pool. And, mostly it ended up with me and him sitting face to face playing guitar, which was great, for me.
I was talking to Zakk about it. He said he would play like Zeppelin covers in front of him.
Yeah.
And he just was like, this is so surreal. Like I'm sitting with like the guy that I grew up playing guitar to, and he's playing Zeppelin in front of me.
Yeah, that's what we used to do. Ed used to call it "Name That Riff," and we would sit down and he'd throw something at me, and I'd see if I could name it, and then I'd throw a couple back at him. We always was funny when we could stump each other. Wow, I just stumped Eddie Van Halen.
It's incredible.
Okay.
Have you seen the Pantera celebration? Have you been to the show with the guys?
I have. I saw them with Metallica. I think it's SoFi, and I've seen many clips of the guys. I'm really glad that they're doing that. I think it's a cool celebration of the music. Also, being in a band with a couple of key members who are not here. And I know that takes a certain type of courage to get up there and celebrate what you did. And you want to do it as well as you can for the fans that want to see it. And Zakk and Charlie do a great job. I mean, I don't think it could have been done with either one of those guys out of the mix.
Were you close with Daryl? Did you
Daryl and Vinny both? Yeah,
both of them.
Yeah, I knew both of those guys before I met the guys in Alice. Yeah.
And I think there was a time when you did Nut Showing, you dedicated it to Daryl and Vinny, right?
Oh, sure.
In France.
Yeah.
That song resonates with so many people.
It does.
And I think people say it's one of the saddest songs ever, but there's something that connects the audience to that song that like no other song. Rolling Stones called it one of the top 10 saddest songs ever. I don't know. I don't know which list they come up with.
It's a heavy tune, no doubt.
Do you remember writing that song and sort of the emotion that was going through? I love the stories behind the songs.
Well, that was part of the Jar of Flies EP. And, I read a lot for the band, and I always have, and that's kind of my role, to make sure that I've got a chunk of good songs to come into the studio with, so that I know that whatever else we come up with, or whatever the guys, inject into whatever I've come up with, I'm walking in with at least some, 5, 6, 7, 8 good song ideas and a bunch of riffs. I just kind of need to know that I'm cool walking into a session for myself, so that I know I've got stuff. And we planned on doing an EP, and that was the one time when the guys were like, "Hey, the rest of us want to kind of get a little more involved in the writing," and I'm like, "That's cool. Like, don't write anything when you come in. We're gonna write some stuff." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." So I still had a couple rat hold. I can't help it. Like a
couple gems saved up.
Well, I think I wrote "Don't Follow" in at the end of a really long tour, and I think I wrote it in Dublin, Ireland, and we'd been on the road for probably 2 years, and we were pretty beat up, and I was missing home, so I wrote that song in the dressing room at the gig that we were playing in Dublin, and I think I might have had a couple of riffs or something, but we showed up to start recording Jar of Flies, and everybody's like, okay, what do you got?
You're like, I happen to have these couple songs here.
I'm like, you told me not to write anything, remember? So I got these, and then we just went from there and made up everything. We wrote and recorded the rest of it in 7 days. So the rest of that stuff, including Nutshell, was all just kind of happening in a week.
Hey, folks, let me take a moment to tell you about my favorite new audio product out there, Sonos. Sonos makes it so easy to fill your home with incredible sound. It's like magic. I just got the new Sonos Ace headphones in black. They're so sleek. Here they are. The first thing you'll notice is just how comfortable these headphones are, even when you wear them for long periods of time. They're lightweight, and the cushioning makes them feel great right away. You'll even see guests wearing them in upcoming episodes. I love using them around the house, while recording, and out on the streets of New York City, listening to music just about all the time. These headphones are Bluetooth enabled and come with 3 buttons. The content key allows you to play, pause, accept calls, and control the volume. Plus, they feature noise cancellation and voice assist. These headphones are exceptionally well done and sound incredible, whether you're listening to your favorite playlist, chatting on a call, watching a movie, or even recording a podcast like this one. They sound particularly fantastic while listening to lip service. The battery life is fantastic, and connecting to the app is a breeze. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on these headphones. Sonos has great gifts for everyone on your list. Visit sonos.com/lips to save 20% on select products. That's sonos.com/lips. Do you ever think about, because obviously the band has always had this mix of incredibly heavy, odd time signatures and acoustic sounds, but when Jar of Flies, when you first started working on it, did you ever think, are we going to alienate the audience because they're used to, the heavy riffs? But did you think at some point, we should just try this? It's a gamble.
I mean, it's a conversation. You're a new band, and our first record. It took a while for that to hit. It took a while for, I think, Man in the Box hit when we'd already been on the road with Ozzy, Van Halen, and I think it finally hit when we were on tour with Slayer and Megadeth and Anthrax. So that's when Man in the Box hit, and you could feel things shift in the middle when we started getting into heavy rotation and heavy play on radio and MTV. And what was the question?
I was saying, is it challenging when you thought about doing, like, because you were saying you're touring with Slayer, and then all of a sudden you're doing songs off a Jar of Flies? That audience would probably have been
okay. No,
well,
I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. I've been rehearsing for 3 days straight, so I'm a little punchy, folks. Excuse me. It was a conversation, but, a lot of the bands that, including Van Halen and Ozzy, changes. I mean, like, the bands that we grew up listening to were really varied, and they would play all sorts of material, and they would have different members take lead vocals, and, that's the era of music that we came up on. So it wasn't really unnatural to us to try to do some different stuff. I think maybe for being a young band and maybe the label might have had concerns or whatever. And I remember playing a couple of those early songs at like a benefit concert, I think at the Palladium for Norwood Fisher's legal defense. So we had to raise some money for Norwood not to go to jail. So we did a show there, and we did some of that stuff. And I remember everybody like, kind of throwing ice and cups at us and stuff when we started playing like Sap, you know, and but they caught on pretty quick, and people went with us, and I think it was important for us to do that early on. We didn't really even advertise that we did that EP. We just put it in the stores as like a thing for fans to find. You know what I mean? So it wasn't even an advertised thing. I don't think people were even really aware of that on a big level, except for our super fans, until Got Me Wrong was in Clerks. I remember talking to Kevin about putting that song in there, and he was working on this film. I'm like, yeah, man, that sounds cool. And he put it in there, and that song kind of blew up with that movie, and everybody's like, man, that song's cool. You're a new tune. I'm like, that's a couple of years old, but cool. Thanks. Yeah.
Had you been writing? Cause I had heard something that you had been writing with Chris Cornell around that time. Were there any songs from that time period that ever like saw the light of day, or not really?
I mean, there were a lot of jams,
Do you have any of it still?
I don't know. I mean, there's probably some stuff around somewhere, but it was mostly just, we all jammed with each other. We'd go over to Ann Wilson's house, and we'd be up all night, playing guitar and singing and having beers, and I'd go over to Chris's place. He had a jam room in his garage, and we had a rehearsal place under the Ballard Bridge, and also in kind of West Seattle as well. So we would all end up hanging and end up at somebody's garage or jam room or living room or something, and that stuff happened a lot. One of the cool things that did get recorded like that was when we were doing that Sap EP, and I wrote a song called Right Turn, and I thought it would be cool to have each of the verses sang by somebody else. So I took the first verse. Let's see, I took the first verse. I think Chris takes the second one, Layne takes the third, and Mark Arm takes the fourth, and then we all kind of joined together at the end. So that was cool. That was a kind of a cool song, because it's got Mark and Chris and us.
In a way, I was going to ask you, you've always had these like super groups, because even that lineup, incredible, right? And now we're going to get into your new record, fantastic new record, by the way, and
Thanks.
tour. But even this record, and we'll go back to the beginning, but this record, you've got Duff, you got Mike Borden. I mean, it's almost like having a super group.
Yeah.
All your Duff, all your friends are in some of the greatest bands in the world.
Yeah,
right?
It's not a bad problem to have.
It's
there.
not.
Yeah.
So I guess you can't even think, because I love asking people this question, like if you could form your ultimate super group, who would be in it? But you sort of do that in a way.
I've kind of already done it.
Yeah. So.
It's fun to, the whole thing that we do is, it's all pretty similar for all of us. I mean, you're a group of friends. You have similar interests. You have some things that are different, and those differences and the similarities are the reason that you kind of end up sounding the way that you sound, and it's that your personality and you know and what your influences are that you bring in, and it's always cool to. But it's always like it's like, going over to your buddy's place to try to learn how to play Rush records,
Yeah.
and, steal a couple of his dad's beers and stuff, and you end up in the garage or in a bedroom. And that's kind of what it is. It's organically kind of jamming, and number one, being a fan of music. Number two, man, I'd really like to do this someday. So you're trying to learn how to do it, and you're doing it with your friends. So Alice has always been that. And any of the records or projects that I've done, outside the band, I mean, I'm going to call my friends.
Yeah.
That's the dynamic that works. I need to have a personal connection with somebody. I'm not going to, I couldn't like call up a bunch of studio cats that I don't know and then try to cut a record. I can't do that. I need to have some personal connection with somebody. And I'm just really fortunate to have a personal connection with a lot of really talented, really good musicians. And we've got a history, all of us. Everybody that's on this record has been on multiple records of mine, and I've been on multiple records of theirs. So,
Yeah, I ended up joining Hole with Courtney probably 10 years ago, so way after they had become well known. And so I never knew the camaraderie behind all the bands in Seattle, but there really was this family affair with Susan and all the bands back in the day, right? Which you don't really find as much anymore. I mean, I know you're friends with a bunch of artists, but do you still feel that same camaraderie like there was back in the day in Seattle when all the bands were coming up?
I mean, I still feel really connected to every one of the people that from that time, and I've made a bunch of new friends in a lot of young bands. Like really connected with the every tour. That's usually where it happens. Is when you spend some time on tour. So I'd never really uh, uh, seen or heard a bunch of Tim Montana or Bones UK,
Good guy,
but I really dug Tim, on a personal level. I mean, it takes a certain kind of nut to do this gig anyway. So like, you learn to recognize your kind pretty quick, and you usually get along with most people, and the girls and Bones are awesome. And
Tim's a real rocker.
He is.
He's the real deal.
Yeah, and Carmen Vandenberg is an insane guitar player,
Yeah.
and Rosie's got a great voice, really cool tunes, and I mean, we fell in with those guys just like we fell in with bands in the old days.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's still happening.
It's interesting. Maybe I wasn't aware of it. But apparently, there's this whole like grunge revival band-wise now I wasn't aware of it up until recently. But there's a bunch of bands now that are starting to happen, like Bad Flower. Another band called Highly Suspect, and people say there's this like grunge revival. I don't know if you've heard any of these bands or if you knew that it's sort of coming back in a way.
I haven't heard those bands, but interested to hear them now that you've mentioned them.
Are you okay with the terminology grunge after all these years? Because initially it was sort of like, maybe was it a negative thing for the bands or not really?
I mean, they have to call every movement something,
right?
And
true.
it's generally a word that nobody within the camp self-applied. You know what I mean? So okay, there's worse things to be called. Yeah, okay, that's fine. I mean, we're all just rock bands from the Northwest and elsewhere.
That's true. It feels like you took about 18 years off between the bookends of the first two records, these last two records.
Yeah.
Is it just because you were concentrating on Alice and just needed to reset? Like, what gave you the inspiration to kind of get back into the solo work?
Yeah, well, my main gig is Alice, and always has been. I started the band in 1987, with Sean and Mike Starr, and Layne was the last to join. And that's always been my focus. I've made 4 records outside the band. I've done some movie work and some soundtrack stuff. That's fun. Played on some friends' records like Glenn Danzig and jammed a few things with the Metallica guys, Ozzy. It's fun to be able to get creative outside of your normal zone, and all the band members have done that too. I mean, Layne put out a great record, Mad Season, with Mike McCready and
amazing record,
and a bunch of really talented folks, and so it's not really an uncommon thing. But I've spent if you add up all the time in the 36 or 37 years I've been in this band, it's about 6 years worth of touring and making records on my own. So
Yeah.
you can see where my dedication is, or
Definitely.
where I spend the most of my focus. And it's been kind of interesting with these last two because Alice is still functioning. So
Yeah.
I'm doing two things at once. So it's a little bit more. I've got to really pace pace myself so that I'm in good shape for the band. I'm also in good shape for what I'm trying to do. So, um, you just all you can really do in this life is follow your gut and do what you feel is right. It felt like I had some time, and then COVID kind of made more time for everybody.
Everyone had a
You
lot
know
of
what I mean?
time.
So that's where Brighton kind of came out of that process, and then I enjoyed making that record and touring it, and I hadn't done it, like you said, in 18, years or so, and I was in a completely different space, just personally too. So I think I enjoyed it in a way that I wasn't able to previously, and I was kind of energized when I got off the road. And normally, when I finish a tour cycle, I need to take some time off,
Yeah.
detach, chill out, and before I feel like I'm ready to start creating again, like, totally, clear the decks and do a little healing and not play guitar and not think about doing the business of being in a band for a while. And that usually takes a couple of months, but this time I went right back into it. I mean, I think I was demoing within the first month I got back,
Well, you were
which is real,
inspired, I
which
guess.
was really, really rare for me. I
Yeah.
usually take more time than that. And I jumped in and these riffs and these songs started kind of coming together really fast. And that became the seeds of what is now I Want Blood. Yeah.
It's a fantastic record, but just you mentioned, and I think we talked about it last time you were on the show, but 1987, the climate was Guns N' Roses. I just moved out to LA at
Yeah.
that point, and I used to play in a band with the singer of LA Guns.
Yeah.
So as part of that
The
whole,
Cult, Chili
yeah.
Peppers, Jane's Addiction. Yeah.
So who were the bands early on? I mean, when you first got into music, I mean, obviously going back to Kiss and, Sabbath and all the bands, but initially, like, what made you kind of get into music early on? Who were those early bands that you decided, I need to do this for a living?
I was into music before I ever really got into a band, so I always liked music, and I'm part of a family that really celebrates and appreciates music, and I think my mom, that was probably one of her dreams too, was to be a musician, but she ended up, being a mom. so, and she was a good mom, but she had an organ in the house, so she'd always be playing stuff and, listening to country music on the radio, watching any sort of music television, like, anything from Hee Haw to Lawrence Welk
Yeah.
to, the Midnight Special, American Bandstand, any sort of music award show. I mean, music was celebrated, so I guess I found it had an appreciation for it as a really young kid, and I think the first thing that really kind of caught my ear was maybe like Fleetwood Mac or Elton John. That was about the time of like Rumors and that was a big record for me. I had like where the light kind of went on, like, man, that's cool. These people are cool. I'd like to
Yeah.
be able to do that. And Elton John too. And I think that was the first record I ever got. My dad, he was stationed in Korea, and he came back with a whole big box of records that he, collected and trading with buddies and stuff. And he pulled an Elton John record out that somebody had given him that he obviously didn't want. And he's like, "You want this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll take that one." And I know who that guy is, and it was Elton John's greatest hits. So that was my first record. Yeah.
Wow. And that was about 87. You end up meeting Layne at a party.
Yeah.
And I think he just let you live with him, which is
Yeah.
kind of rare where you don't know someone well.
Yeah. Well, I had my family situation was, we had a pretty rough year in the family. I basically was, raised by my grandmother and my mother, and my brother went to live with my dad, and so it was me and my sister and my grandmother and mother, and they both got ill and passed within the same year.
Oh, wow.
Um, and then the house was sold and I was basically on my own. And at that time I was 20, 21. So, I mean, well past the point where you're probably out of the house by then
Yeah.
anyway. And, after that happened, I knew there was a couple of, musicians I'd met. I'd met Layne and I think his guitar player Nick at a show they played in Tacoma, which is where I'm from.
You've been playing
And
for a while at that point.
oh yeah, I had various little bands that I was jamming in and stuff like that. And but I remember hearing Layne and it really it stuck with me. I remember hearing him and seeing him, and I just thought there was something to him. And I'm like, I'd really like to jam with that guy and end up in a band. And I ran into him at a party months later, and and after things had happened with my home life or whatever, kind of blowing apart, and me not really having any place to go. I didn't have anything tying me down, and I remember when my uncle Mylan, my mom's older brother, he's like, this was her dream too, and I know you want to do this, and like, you have nothing holding you back now. Give it a shot. Try it. If you want to try to be in a band, be in a band. And like that kind of gave me the final like okay from a family member. Like, give it a shot. Instead of like, oh, you got to have something to fall back on. You should go back to school. You should get a job. He was like, try it out. And that was a really important thing to me, to have that sort of positive reinforcement from him at a really shitty time,
Because your
and
dad never really thought music was a real, I mean, like my dad never thought it was a real job that I had.
yeah, I don't think he really did. I mean, we were a little bit estranged at that point too. He wasn't really that closely involved in my life in my teen years and stuff. So, um, but anyway, I kind of, I took that chance and realized, that this was something I wanted to do. And so you just do anything you can to do that. You answer ads in the back of the Rocket or whatever local music mag or whatever, like, and you call guys up and you take bus rides to, other towns, and you jam and stuff like that. And, you hang out with people for, maybe some days, maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a few months. And then, that runs its course, and then you move on to somebody else, or you meet a bunch of new people by doing that, other band members that maybe you jam with, or other people, and you just keep forming little bands until you kind of, you've done enough there and it's time to move on. And I was kind of in a group where I knew it was time to move on, and I met Layne, and he was working at this place called the Music Bank, which was underneath the Ballard Bridge. And um he's like, man, I got a jam room, and I kind of crashed there too. So if you want to, I can maybe get you a job there, and you can just, crash on the couch or whatever, and we can jam, and I'm like, cool. So I moved in with him, and, we quickly became friends, and, I started jamming with his band, and he started jamming with, me and some other guys. And then I called Mike or Sean up, and Sean brought Mike down. I'd already jammed with Mike in a previous iteration of one of those little things that I explained for about 2 days, like where you call somebody up and go jam. And Sean came down to the Music Bank, and he's like, what kind of bass player are you thinking about? I'm like, man, I jam with this guy named Mike Starr. He was really cool, good sense of humor, great bass player. He's like, that's funny because he's my best friend and I'm dating his sister. I'll bring him down too.
Amazing.
So he brought the three of us started jamming, and then Layne kind of slowly became involved. And then it in pretty short order, we decided, that it was a good thing, and we had a lot in common, and
Was the chemistry there right away when you first started getting in and rehearsing with everyone?
yeah, I think so. Yeah, the sense of humor, we had a
You laughed a lot, right?
pretty good sense of humor,
Yeah.
gallows humor, sarcasm ran high, and we liked similar music. We wanted to make some rock and roll, and we were also, not unaware that, there was some cool things going on in town. So we come from kind of like a little bit of a outpost, I guess, up in the Northwest, but that's where Jimi Hendrix came from, and it's where it's where Hart came from, and Queensryche was hitting
Yeah.
right about, they were already hitting at that time, so
But-
they were a pretty important band for all of us as well.
87, everybody was sort of like, obviously with Guns, everybody was sort of maybe getting out of the glam thing a little bit, but you almost went through like a teeny phase of the glam movement in a way, right?
I mean, we formed in the 80s,
Yeah.
so we had trappings of the 80s like everybody else. Yeah, but it didn't take long for us to shed those things that were unimportant or that didn't fit us, until you find yourself. that happened in pretty short order. But
How did you find the sound for the band? 'Cause it was so unique, and obviously the double vocals. And early
yeah,
on, I know it was more backing vocals for you. Then eventually, it sort of became unison. And I think Lane really pushed you to
yeah,
use your voice a lot.
it
But
did.
how did you find your sound? Because it was so unique at the time, and nobody was doing that. The bending of the notes that you did, and the wah wah pedal, and
Yeah,
yeah, and the talk box, obviously.
I don't know, man. Everybody goes about doing things their own way. You know
Mm,
what I mean? You can play the same notes, you can play the same song, but it's going to sound a little different because of the, how your flesh resonates through an electrical or a wooden instrument,
yeah.
with heads and, drums in your case. So, uh, your personality is going to come through. So the sound is basically just the four of us and how we blended together. And that's the cool thing about bands because it takes everybody. Everybody is necessary, you know what I mean? And to make the racket that you make. So, yeah.
And you signed this deal, and the first singles, "We Die Young," is the label like, "This song might be too heavy as a single." I mean, we're okay with the single, but "We Die
Yeah.
Young" might be a little too heavy, ultimately.
We had a few clashes early on
Yeah.
like choices of singles and, maybe some artwork that was a little hardcore video
Yeah.
subject matter. Jesus Christ with his eyes sewn shut. You know what I mean?
Right.
There were probably a few conversations of like, hey, can you guys
Yeah, tone it down a
tone
little
that down?
bit,
Like,
yeah.
no, we're not going to.
Walmart needs to
And
carry this record, yeah.
we had really good representation in our management team with Susan Silver and Kelly Curtis, and they'd already had success, signing their acts,
Mm,
Mother Love Bone and Soundgarden to major labels, and we had a really good attorney in Michelle Anthony and Peter Paterno, who's still our attorney,
yeah.
and so we got a really good deal. We didn't we kept our rights to our publishing. We didn't take a whole lot of money. You know what I mean? We were more into there was about three or four things in the negotiation process which were like, this is a deal breaker. Okay, well, see you later then,
Yeah.
and then they'd call a week or two later, like, okay, all right, we'll give you that. But this other thing, this is a deal breaker. Nope. No, we're not doing that. And we put our foot in the ground, and we didn't want to give up creative control. We didn't want anybody messing around with our songs. We knew what we wanted to do. By that point, we'd had a good batch of songs. We felt like they worked. They were unique to us, and we were part of a larger whole. In the community, there was,
Movement, yeah.
there was a bunch of really cool bands,
Yeah.
which were operating at a pretty high level, and we were all doing it at the same time. We're all the same age or within a period of a couple of years in age. So it was a really kind of trippy thing to be a part of that. And you knew that there was an energy in the air, and you knew that you were a part of it.
Mm,
So this was something that was just being created out of the air, creating out of nothing, just by effort and will alone. And also just the excitement of being part of that sort of crew. Like going to the Central Tavern and listening to Cornell wail.
yeah.
Or like going to some motor garage somewhere and watching Mark Arm kill it, you know what I mean? Like, it was pretty cool, I mean, you could do that on a regular basis. We would pop around or do each other's gigs. Plus, we had great bands coming through,
Yeah.
Faith No More, The Cult, Jane's Addiction, we'd be rolling through town, The Peppers, like it was cool.
Or to pop in a bar and seeing Kurt play,
It was
right?
it was it was a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He was the guy I knew the least. I didn't
Mm.
know Kurt that much. We only met a couple of times. I knew everybody else pretty well, but I knew Chris. Chris, I knew quite a bit, and I knew Dave a little bit. But yeah, I met Kurt twice. I met
I
him
think he
once.
kept to himself a lot too,
Well,
right?
I think he and Layne hung out a lot,
Yeah.
but I never really hung out with him too much. The first time I met him was in South America for two Washington guys to meet, and he grew up in Aberdeen and I grew up in Spanaway, basically. So we were probably closer geographically than the rest of the crew, but um, and uh, the Melvins were, they were down Olympia way too. So we were the three southern
Yeah.
outposts, I guess. But Yeah, it took us going to South America and playing a festival together to actually meet, and we hung out in a hotel room for about an hour, and then I think I met him when they did the MTV Unplugged thing or some sort of thing on a wharf in Seattle, and that was it.
But you saw the band earlier on play the clubs, I would imagine, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you think when you first saw them? It must have been like, was it like a revelation? Like, I know
Well,
these
we were
guys.
kind of already rolling in our own thing, so I mean, you know what I mean? I didn't, that I mean, you know, of course, I was aware of the band. I was aware of Bleach, but, you know, I was kind of more I had more of a connection to everybody else, you
Mm,
know, like the Trees,
yeah.
Mudhoney, you know, Love Bone, Soundgarden. Those were the bands that I actually actively hung out with, and we went to each other's gigs and stuff like that. I don't think I saw Nirvana till post, like, Nevermind,
Oh,
you
wow.
know, so yeah,
Mark Lanigan was
yeah,
so amazing.
yeah,
We miss him a
yeah,
lot. He was an incredible
yeah,
singer. One of my favorite stories about, behind the songs, obviously, Rooster was such an incredible song. It's about your dad
yeah,
and Vietnam. And, I'd love to know just a little bit about what the inspiration behind the song. Because I know your dad came to see you play
yeah,
and he saw that song and took his hat off and kind of acknowledged. Because my dad, as I mentioned, never really thought music was a real profession for me until he got to see me play at the Hollywood Bowl once. He's
yeah.
like, all right, you have a job. I was
All
like,
right.
I think
Oh,
I've been
it's a
doing
real
my,
thing. Yeah,
yeah.
sure.
But before then, it was like a hobby to him. So tell me
Well,
that story and what it meant to have him come see you play, and especially behind, the story behind that song too.
yeah, well, I mean, I think any good parent probably and wisely so, would not want their kid to probably be in a band because it's a pretty it's not a guarantee for a
Yeah,
successful
that's
life.
true.
And but you know what I mean? If you feel called to it, yeah, you got to do it. And I think after a while of doing that, like you say, of proving it to yourself without the sport, maybe that's some of the reason why you were able to accomplish some of the things that you weren't able to, what you might not have done if because you didn't have the sport, you didn't have the backing. I think my dad told me that, said something to me like that once, and it's kind of harsh in a way, but it's like you're the man you are because I wasn't around because I didn't support you. So like
Mm,
you should feel good about yourself,
mm,
not the fact I mean that I wasn't there for you in that manner, but you should feel good about yourself because you made that out. You're a self-made man, And I remember him saying that to me, and I kind of took him telling me that to like, whoa, that's pretty significant,
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, my folks divorced, when I was pretty young, and I'm the oldest of three, so we kind of reconnected after, we would stay in touch, or I would go visit him in Oklahoma or whatever, and we kind of reconnected more after I think my mom passed away, and after my band got going, and I wrote that song. That song was a kind of, I guess, an attempt by me to understand him a little bit better, and like every kid, that has problems with their parents, or especially in a divorced or split family sort of situation, there could be resentment and all sorts of emotions and feelings and stuff like that. And I guess that was my attempt at being realizing that I'm my own man. I'm a man now, and trying to think about that experience through his eyes, and like what that war maybe did to him, and the effect that it had on him and my family, and I'm always been a big film fan,
Mm,
and Kubrick's movie, Full Metal Jacket, and Coppola's, Apocalypse Now,
yeah.
there's some really good ones, but those are the two that really kind of hit me, and kind of started me thinking about my dad's own experience going through that. And
Because that was his nickname, right? Rooster, in a sense,
yeah,
right?
it was it was his nickname from when he was a kid. He didn't get that in Vietnam. My great grandfather, I think, called him Rooster because he was just a cocky little kid that had a alfalfa
All right.
thing with his hair stick up straight like the comb on a
Yeah,
rooster.
yeah.
So yeah, and in Oklahoma, everybody has a nickname.
Nickname.
I think his cousin is let's see, Danny was Ace, my dad was Rooster, Glenn was Spade, Yeah, I mean, everybody.
Did you have a nickname?
Oh yeah, yeah.
What was
My
your
my
nickname?
mom's name was Gloria, but he called her Sally.
Okay.
My name's Jerry, but he called me Ralph.
Okay.
My sister is Sherry, but he called her Sis, and my brother David, he called Ernk Wilson. So
Sounds like something I would
yeah,
do. I don't know why, but
you go by nicknames in the South. If you hear your real name, you know you're in trouble.
it's so
You know what I mean?
fascinating.
Jerry. Oh shit, something's up. Yeah.
When
You want to be called the nickname because that means everything's cool.
Yeah, amazing. I was going to tell you, Jerry, when you think about it, it's probably astounding to you. It's like 30 years for the dog record, the three-legged dog record, which I think you guys refer to it as like the dog record. When you think about it, I mean, do you ever go back and listen to those records? Anything would change on those records? Are you super happy with or are you such a perfectionist that you're like, I wish I could have doubled the lead here? Or what, I don't know. Or when you listen to them again, because I'm sure you have to, every now and then you revisit them, or maybe you don't.
I mean, I can listen to anything if I want to get in that critical headspace
Yeah.
and hear some things that maybe I would have changed, but for the time and for what it is at that particular at that particular moment and that indelible capturing of a moment in time. I mean, each of them are what they are, and I don't think they could be any better than they are. So, I can always hear like, oh, that background vocal could have been up, or maybe I should add a little better guitar tone on this, or that's just all minor stuff. I mean, one of the cool things, and I've heard so many musicians say this, but the one that really struck me was Keith Richards. It's like you don't want it to be too perfect. You want to be just good enough to catch a vibe, and it's more about the vibe than being perfect or on key or in time. As long as it captures the vibe, then leave it alone. It's good enough, So
Well, the vibes were
yeah,
definitely there.
yeah, yeah.
Let's talk about when you're writing a song, we just obviously we're talking about your new solo record in a minute, but do you know if it's an Alice song or a Jerry song or, you just kind of write, it depends on the players you have in the room at that point for you?
I mean, I just write, to write for myself. Quite simply, is if I'm writing while we're working on a record or I'm jamming on something with the band, then and the guys like it. That's the third thing. They don't like everything I come up with. I don't like everything they come up with either. So, that's the process. So it's really quite simply if I'm working with Alice and I record a song with Alice, of course it becomes an Alice in Chains song. If I'm working with other people, then it's not an Alice in Chains song. Could it be if we had jammed together? Maybe, but
Yeah.
then again, I don't think it would be exactly the way that it turned out there. So, you know, again, it's just whatever circumstance you happen to be in. I'm going to be myself within the collective of Alice in
Right.
Chains, but I am just a member of a collective. I'm an equal member of the band. So, in this situation, it's kind of a misnomer, and I always hate it. Solo records, like you know what I mean. Like, there's nothing solo about a record.
Yeah.
It's
a group.
it's a group.
Yeah.
It takes a group of people to bring it in, and every one of those musicians, and Joe Barresi and Tyler Bates, and my demo partner Maxwell Urosky, it takes 15, 20 people to bring that thing in. You know what I mean? And everybody dedicated to bringing in that vision and injecting themselves into that to make it the best record that they can. Now, when I'm working on a record on my own, of course, I'm trying to bring in a piece of work that's constructed how I want it constructed, but it's always open enough for everybody to inject themselves into it and to come up with stuff and like, whoa, what did you do there? That was cool. Do that again. You know, like that's just the normal process of making music and happy accidents, as you call them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Things that are just in the moment. So
Even on this record, there's a spoken word aspect to the record for those of you who collect vinyl. I'm a huge vinyl guy, and you actually had a lot of the guys on the record just send in pieces of music. I'm sure Duff did and Joe did, and you just said, "Hey, send me whatever music you want, and I'll do a spoken word thing." That's an interesting idea. Obviously, it was more for the vinyl collectors, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's another really great example of pulling shit out of your ass. Like I was. It started with me just trying to figure out something cool to put on the B side. I didn't have any extra music that I wanted to write, and so what do? You sometimes you put like a cappella tracks or instrumentals, or you put like a proper B side, another leftover track or whatever. I didn't have that, so but I wanted to do something special you know, and try to do something a little cool. I'm like, well, what I've never really done a spoken word kind of, you know, recitation of the lyrics. And I thought it might be kind of cool to have that on the B side of Vilified. That was the first single.
Yeah.
And so I recorded it and it sounded cool, but I thought it needed a little bit more. And I thought maybe it needs some music or something. And like I said, I just finished a record, so I didn't want to jump into writing another
Right.
little piece of music. And it was right at the end of the thing too. Like it was like crunch time, right? Like getting close to like pressing vinyl and needing all the stuff to be there to be able to make our deadline months down the road. Like, what are you going to put on the B side? And I'm like, okay, I'll do a spoken word. So I did the spoken word, and I'm like, okay, it's not quite cool enough. I think it needs music. And so I was sitting there with Maxwell, my demo partner, the guy who rode the hard miles with me for those 3 or 4
Yeah.
months making the demos, and he's a really talented musician too. I'm like, man, you want to come up with something for this? And he's like, yeah, let me mess around with it for a night. And he came back the next day with that piece of music, and we put it together, and it sounded killer. And then I brought that into Joe Barisi, my producing partner, and I showed him, and he's like, man, you should do this for all of them. And I'm like, man, we gotta turn this in like 2 weeks, man. And he's like, you can do it. So I'm like, okay. So the only way I could do that was I called up everybody that I'd made the record with, or the last record, or Jam. My drummer from my live band right now is Roy Mayorga, who's a really talented musician and does a lot of scoring. So I called a bunch of people like I called George Adrian, Greg Pachado did one, Barisi did one, Maxwell did two, I think. I think Roy Mayorga did two as well.
Duff maybe or no? Duff.
I don't think Duff did one. Michael Rosen, the pedal steel player on the last record, he did one. I know I'm forgetting somebody, but anyway, there's no way I could get it done. I wasn't in the headspace to write, so I just sent it out to my friends, and they also hadn't heard the songs, and I didn't want them to ref the music at all,
Yeah.
which I thought was really cool. Come up with something independently to this, and so I got this creative stew going of like sending the lyrics out to people, having them come up with the music, put it back. We'd tweak it a little bit until it fit or whatever, but mostly it was pretty good. Oh, Vincent Jones, or the keyboard player on both of the last two records, he did one with George Adrian as well. But we ended up with 9 pieces of really interesting takes on the lyrics, but the music is done by creative partners of mine, not only on this record but others, and in a live context. And it has nothing to do with the real music. So it's truly a
Completely different,
standalone piece. You know, it's kind of cool.
And back in the day,
Yeah.
bands used to hide tracks. There'd be hidden tracks and backwards tracks. And so I guess in a way, maybe it was like your homage to what that was all about when people used to buy records for the hidden tracks.
I heard Jack White. I think he put like an EP in between a record in between the grooves.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of twisted guy is that?
Oh, he's so into vinyl.
I love that dude.
Yeah,
That is awesome. What a great idea.
Talk to me a little bit about finding your voice, because early on, I think Layne would push you to really sing a lot of the songs. It's like, you wrote it, you sing it, right? So from then until now, and how you kind of found your voice and your voice developed, because I mean, your voice is incredible. So I think back in the day, it was probably early on, you were just, you didn't want to step on anyone's toes. And obviously Layne was such an incredible vocalist. You're like, I think I got a great singer.
Yeah.
But now to take on all the vocal responsibilities, and aside from Alice, obviously.
I always sang because I would write tunes and stuff like that. And so I'd come up with melodies and verses and stuff. And then, but like, I never felt like I was a lead singer. I was a guitar player and a songwriter, and I'd pipe up singing backups. That was good enough for me. And besides, I'm, standing next to Layne Staley. So he's got it, he's got it covered. You know what I mean? And, I admired him, as a talent, and he was unique, and he had it, and I still got to sing with him because the stuff was, there was a lot of harmony stuff that both he liked and I did, and I would either come up with harmonies or he would come up with harmonies. And so we had a really cool relationship. The way that we worked, was we generally filled each other's gaps. You know what I mean? So when I didn't have something, I could develop something to hear. I'm like, this is all I got. Can you take it from here? He's like, yeah, I got it. Or like, hey, I need you to write me like the most fucked up piece of music you can write me. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I mean, the most fucked up piece of music you can write me. So I wrote him like Sick Man for him, I'm like, okay. So he had an idea for the lyric or whatever, but that was his description of what what he needed, so I would come up with it. So what he needed, I filled, and what he, what I needed, he would fill. So um, uh, it was a cool partnership that way, and it started pretty early on. I think on the Sap EP, where he's like, you write a lot of these songs, and they're really personal to you, and it's not that I don't want to sing them, but I think you have a more personal connection to some of these lyrics. I think you should sing some of them. And I'm like, I don't want to sing lead, man. You got it, And he's like, no, I really think you should. And like, okay. And so that was kind of the beginning of me actually taking some leads, and it just kept building. Every record I got a little bit more and more and more. And then obviously, when we had stopped functioning as a band and Layne passed, we took some time with that and decided to, when the time was right, that we would maybe jam together again, and we invited William into the process. And then, it was just a continual building process. I'm glad I had that experience to be able to carry into the next chapter of what Alice, would kind of change into and also continue to be. So with William and I working together, but it was still the same template that we always said. It takes two singers to fly this plane, so.
There weren't a lot of bands
and
doing
I like
that
that.
back in the, yeah.
I like that.
Aside from like Fleetwood Mac, there weren't a ton of bands that were doing like the double vocals back in the day like that.
The Beatles, man.
But I mean, I feel in
the Eagles,
in the heavy rock scenarios, right?
Pink Floyd.
I feel like you guys sort of broke new ground though for what was going on. I really do. I feel like there was not a lot.
The Who.
I think you also had your own thing. You did it your own.
No,
way,
but those are those are all examples of pretty big bands that have two vocalists. And in the case of like Townsend, he's more of the songwriter of the band.
True.
So I feel some connection to the Who a little bit in that way.
Walk me through the economics of doing your own record versus Alice. Right, it's changed. The business has changed so much. Labels these days, it's like there's a debate whether you need a label, whether you don't need a label. At the end of the day, they're just marketing machines, right? But for yourself, and obviously being in a big machine like Alice to do your own record, like how did the economics change? And it's so tough to be on tour these days. And even if you're going to Australia, it costs, $15,000 just to get visas. I mean, it's so expensive, right?
Yeah, the cost of doing everything continues to go up, and the cost that you make doing it continues to go down. So it's a pretty bad business model, and it makes it really hard on artists, of all sizes, from small to big. So it has changed, but that is just that's the rule of life. It is always in motion. It is always changing. You have to adapt. You have to overcome, and you got to figure out what the situation is. So, ultimately the game remains the same. You're still trying to create something out of nothing. You're trying to make something that makes you feel good. Like, man, that's good. That's a good song, or that's a good record. I feel good about this. I want to put this out. And then going out and playing it for people. That hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It's just the mechanics and all of that. There's still labels there. I think there's far more technology and connectivity now with everything being online and Pro Tools and all that stuff, where it opens up the access to the rest of the planet of, talented people, or people who want to become artists or recording artists or whatever. It's opened up the door for a lot of people to be able to do that. You know what I mean? Do it on your own, a little more DIY, do it yourself, so DIY. But, and on this particular record, it's really funny that I've always really kind of worked within the context of being on a label and being in partnership with a label, and it's when it works well, and you have a good relationship with your label, and you have a label that's going to stick with an artist for 3, 4, 5, 6 records and develop you up. I don't think that happens as much anymore.
Does not happen.
It's still there a little bit, but only for a very handful of people. And it took me doing these last 2 records on my own before I actually did my first indie record. You know what I mean? So like Brighton and I Want Blood are my first 2 indie records, and they're completely done, out of the office, and it's been really kind of fun doing it that way.
And especially when you're footing the bill, right? If you're hiring a publicist or like, then it changes everything. Right?
Yeah, but I mean, it can, you still need labeled services for distribution and stuff like that. And I've enjoyed making these records. I've enjoyed really, hiring the independent team for territories, UK, Europe, South America, here, talking to vinyl plants, making deals, getting the artwork
So
together.
you're doing that yourself.
Yeah, but we've always been involved with that in Alice. So I take, everything I'm doing here, I have to give a lot of credit to what we all learned and what we did in Alice. I take a lot of that with me, and I can ref that, because of the experience we had. We're always heavily involved in everything from artwork to videos to singles, you name it. How the light show is, the package, how many trucks are we taking? I mean, you got to be aware of all that stuff, and
even the early album covers, I remember
all of it,
super hands on,
all of it, and we had a great partnership with a good artist, Rocky Shank, and the artist that has done the last two covers for me on Brighton and I Want Blood, and actually the last three Alice in Chains record is Ryan Clark from Invisible Creature.
The cover of this record almost references Facelift in a way. Is it possible that there's a similarity to like the look of it? Yeah,
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, when I saw it, I was like, it reminds me a little bit of
black and white Facelift.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right.
You're obviously a huge vinyl guy. We're just talking about calling the plants yourself and everything. And I'd love to ask like pretty interesting questions at the end of the show. Like, do you have like a top 5 perfect albums for Jerry Cantrell? Like what you consider perfect that you would just leave on?
I mean,
every song's great.
Going back to my first collection, which was just a little stand of records about this big, and that Madman Across the Water, I think, is one of those for me. Dark Side of the Moon, is another. I always felt connected to Volume 4 for some reason. Black Sabbath. Probably Led Zeppelin 4 too.
Yeah.
If you want to stick to the 4s. Tres Hombres, ZZ Top, Highway to Hell, AC/DC, Number of the Beast, Iron Maiden, British Steel, Judas Priest, UFO, Strangers in the Night, Aerosmith, Rocks.
Amazing, amazing record. I had Maynard in here yesterday, and he also picked AC/DC as one of his perfect albums.
Oh yeah,
I feel like that's everyone's perfect album.
I think every one of their records is perfect.
And we were talking about film a little bit in Apocalypse Now and some of the Kubrick films back in the day. Do you have like a top 5? You're a huge film guy, I assume, right?
Yeah.
Top 5 favorite films that you just can watch over and over again that you love?
Yeah, I mean, favorite lists to me are just it
tough.
Doesn't
have to be in no particular order.
It's just tough, but I would say those two probably are up there. Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket, I think, are two. Anything Kubrick does, I love all of his movies. Would he make 10?
Yeah. So all 10 of them.
Yeah, seriously, all Kubrick. I think the Coen brothers are amazing about everything they touch. I'm a huge fan of. The Big Lebowski, it's like, it's about as close to perfect as you can get. The Exorcist, I think, was a really cool movie for me.
Still holds up.
Yeah. Rosemary's Baby. I was a big horror fan when I was a kid. So Polanski's a pretty amazing filmmaker too.
Are you a fan of the new horror movies that are coming out, or you don't really?
I kind of, it's not that I'm, there was a shift where I kind of moved off it a little bit. It doesn't mean I don't appreciate it, but not in the way that I would go see The Evil Dead and Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, I loved all that stuff. Huge Stephen King fan, but I like, The Road's pretty cool. The Viggo Mortensen movie, the McCormick, adaptation or whatever, and No Country for Old Men. What's another one? There Will Be Blood.
Yeah, amazing movie.
Daniel Day-Lewis. Jesus, that guy's badass.
He's incredible.
Yeah.
Other bands.
His last movie was great. Phantom Thread.
Oh, I never saw that.
You should see it. It's very twisted.
I heard it was great.
Yeah.
Other bands from back in the day, I think we mentioned Mudhoney and a few bands like that you never really feel like got, they were a bit underrated and they should have gotten more attention. Mark Lanigan, we mentioned.
I don't know. I mean, I think Mudhoney made some noise, and I think the right people, paid attention to them. They just we're over touring Europe, man.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, I always try to operate on a be happy with what you get. And I would think that Mark and the guys are probably pretty happy with who they are. They've done things that how they wanted to do them. They sound exactly how they sound. They are what they are, and they can do it whenever they want to do it. You know, they don't do it so it kills them, you know, like, or breaks them apart. You know, they've taken their time with it. They take time away from it. They come back to it. That's a cool band, you know, and, I think they would say that they're probably pretty happy with what they got.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way with my situation, you know.
Definitely.
All the ups and all the downs, warts and all. Yeah.
Well, it's another fantastic new record, and the tour's coming up. So, any cities that you're super excited about hitting this time around?
Yeah, I mean, all of them. You know, it's always cool when you get to go to a place you haven't been before, and usually every tour you try to pencil a couple of those in. And within the last few Alice tours, and including my last tour, we were like able to knock a few of those off. We'd never played Greece before, and we'd never played Russia before, which I don't think you're going to get to play for
never.
A while now.
Or China, maybe, for that matter, I guess.
That would be cool. But like, you know, we got to play St. Petersburg and Moscow. We got to play Athens. We played Tel Aviv. We'd never played Israel before. That was cool. I got to play, speaking of a place that's probably pretty tough to get to now. We played Tel Aviv twice in the last 5 years or so. So
incredible. Any place
or
you
actually
haven't
3
been?
times. Yeah.
Any place you haven't been that you still want to?
Yeah, I always wanted to play a couple of gigs in Africa, a little more Asia. We've only really done a handful of, like, you know, we knocked Auckland off the list. New Zealand, that was one we did in the last handful of years that we never got to play there. Never played Iceland. I'd like to play. I'd like to go to Reykjavik.
Yeah,
that'd be cool. Never played Alaska. I think we're talking about next time we go out, we're going to try to do an Alaska show. So that's a state we've never hit. And I spent 3 years growing up there when I was a kid. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for so many great years of amazing music.
Yeah.
And thanks for coming in again. It's great to do this in person. I think Zoom is whatever, but like COVID was COVID, and it's great to do this like in person now. So I appreciate it. Pick up the new fantastic record and go check out Jerry on tour coming up next year.
I Want Blood.
Go get you some.
Pick it up.
Thanks for coming in, Jerry. Appreciate it.
Cool.
Thanks, my brother.